Today we're talking about prototyping with the GameCrafter CEO and board game designer JT Smith.
For a lot of people like myself, publishing isn't the end goal. It's like literally coming up with the design, the thought process is the point, right? That journey of designing the game is the most important thing. If it happens to get published, great, but that's not the goal. But for other people, finding a publisher is the big thing. So you should be thinking about who it is that your ideal publisher for this game is. What kind of games do they publish? And so am I designing a game that they're going to even be interested in at the end?
Coming up now on Product of Play. Welcome to Product of Play, the podcast that dives into game development from a product perspective. I'm your host, Curtis Schmidt. Join me as we uncover the magic behind crafting captivating board games, cutting-edge VR experiences, and immersive video games. We'll delve into every aspect of development, from concept ideation and design to testing, marketing strategies, and beyond. This is Product of Play, where the art of game creation meets the science of product success. Today's episode is all about one of the most crucial steps in game development, prototyping. Whether you're designing your first board game or you're a seasoned creator, the prototyping phase can make or break your game's success. To help us unpack the best practices for game prototyping, I'm thrilled to be joined by JT Smith, the CEO of the GameCrafter, a service that makes it easier than ever for designers to create high-quality board game prototypes. He's also the designer of The Captain is Dead and the architect of Component Studio, a powerful tool that simplifies game component creation. Thanks for being on the show today, JT.
Thanks for having me. Really excited to be here.
Yeah. So let's talk about what are the key steps that people should take before starting to do a game prototype.
Well, you should probably have a game design. I mean, that's the base at the very basic level, right? But really, it's a matter of how you want to prototype. Make sure you have a game to play, but get it to the table as quickly as possible, which means create a prototype and go. Because your idea might fail instantly, and you don't want to spend a whole lot of time on something that isn't going to work, right? And you don't know until you get it in front of people a lot of times. That's that with any creative work, right? It's that way. You write
Absolutely.
So really, like, get the rough draft out as quickly as you can. And that'll look different for different people. Some people just make handwritten cards on some index cards, that sort of thing. Other people will do like I do and go straight to print at the GameCrafter, because nobody would be able to read my handwriting if I did it that way, right? And it's so easy to go that way for me, so I just do. But really, it's just get it to the table as fast as possible in whatever means that means for you. So if it needs to look good for you, then do that. But if you can, just get it in front of people, that's what you want to do.
So then how does GameCrafter kind of help streamline that process?
We provide all kinds of tools and community and all kinds of things that'll help you with it. I'll give you a few examples.
Please do.
Yeah. So first of all, we have a product called Component Studio, which you mentioned in my intro there. That is a piece of software that literally allows you to take a spreadsheet and turn it into a bunch of components, tiles or cards, chits, that sort of thing. So basically, you design one card and it will design the other 100 for you.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So it's really cool because it's basically, if you could hook Photoshop up to a spreadsheet, which you can, there's something called data merge in Photoshop. It's like that, if you've ever used that, only dramatically more powerful and easy to use. And it's all web-based. So you can use it from your phone or whatever type of computer operating system you have. But anyway, it will then generate all of the images that you need for your cards and give you an easy button to just hit one button and upload them to the GameCrafter. So that's one thing that we do. We also provide, if you're not going through that route, we provide templates that will allow you to walk you through the process of how to upload your art. We've got hundreds of videos on YouTube, on our YouTube channel, to walk you through that process as well as written articles in our help system. Plus, we provide a whole lot of community features that allow you to interact with the 400,000 or 500,000. I forget how many people we have in our community now, but there's like 500,000 people in our community. So you can go through like our Discord channel or our Facebook group or our Reddit group or whatever, and there will be all the questions people have asked in the past. Plus you can ask your own of people live in the community and get an instant answer.
What are some of the kind of common mistakes that you think new designers can fall into?
The biggest one is the one I mentioned at the beginning, is taking too long to try out your idea, right? That's one where people they sit and iterate, and they're nervous about showing it to people, and they, just wait too long. So get it out there and take the hit. It always a hit to your ego when you bring out a design, because you're like, this is going to be great. And then you're like, I'm a failure. Then when you get into the prototyping process, like if you're going to print it, the biggest mistake people make is that they don't actually understand kind of how print works. And that's understandable if you haven't worked in the print industry before. So, for example, you get a card and there's ink printed all the way to the edge of the card. People think that we literally print to the edge of the paper, and that's how they get that. But that's not true. We print past that, called bleed, and then we cut off the edge. That's how you get ink to the edge of the paper, is that it's printed past the edge, and then we just cut off the edge. And so bleed is a really important concept for a lot of people. And so when they design their cards, if they haven't, looked at any of our videos or anything like that, they'll design to the edge of the card, but they won't have any of that extra bleed on there. And then when they go to upload their cards, they're like, I don't know, this doesn't work. It's going to cut off my text, or, that sort of thing. So that's probably the biggest biggest mistake people make when they're designing the, print files for prototyping.
So then is the thought that once I have settled on my final design, that I can then just send it from there to the printer?
I'm sorry, I probably should have started at the beginning with what is the Game Crafter for people that don't know. So the Game Crafter is literally a print-on-demand company. That's my company. So you will upload artwork to our website. You will choose parts that you want, like dice or those kinds of things. And we can make literally anything. So if you got a board or cards or boxes, the rule book, any of the pieces that you might need, a spinner for your game, any of that, we can make all of those components for you. So you're going to upload artwork to tell us what those things should look like. And then we literally can print 1 copy, 1,000 copies, whatever, send it to you, send it to a publisher, send it to your backers if you're running a Kickstarter, that sort of thing. So it's literally you design a game and upload the artwork to our website, and then you get a copy in the mail. It's that simple.
So you guys can handle massive production releases as well, or is it that then after they get done using your services, then they take it to a printer and say, okay, these are all of our final files, or both?
It's a little bit of both. So we work with a lot of long run printers as well. So we're what's considered a short run printer, which means generally speaking, if you're doing less than 1,000 copies, you're going to go with us. If you're doing more than 1,000 copies, you generally will go with a company that specializes in that, because they will give you a better price. However, the companies that specialize in that are almost exclusively in Asia. So that means you're dealing with importing goods. And so that makes it more challenging for people. It gives them, it's a risk factor that a lot of people just don't know how to deal with. So we also do long run production. We just got an order for $200,000 yesterday, for example, for a big long run of games, right? So it's not that we don't do long run, it's just not our specialty. I'm just going to give you a little background. So the Game Crafter really specializes, like I said, in this kind of short run where we can make 1 copy of something. And the kind of processes and equipment that go into building something that can do, where we can build just 1 of something, is a very different factory than the kind of factory that you build to build 10,000 of something, right? 10,000 of something, everything is very automated in a very different way than the robots that we use to build things in our factory. Like if a factory that builds 10,000 of something, some of their robots, they will set up, it'll take 12 hours to just configure the robot for the particular thing they're making to make 1 box, right? Or to make, 1 or 10,000 boxes.
Right.
If it took 12 hours for us to configure a machine, we would be out of business, right? Like our average turnover time to move to a new product is 1 minute, not 12 hours, right? So, but that also means that we sacrifice the ability to scale as well as you could if your factory was designed around scaling, right? So we scale in a different way. We're trying to do as many games as possible one at a time, whereas they're trying to do one thing over and over again 10,000 times.
Well, so then how do you also deal with components and, dice and counters and little plastic doodads and all that sort of thing?
We have one of the largest selections of those in existence, basically in our factory. So we've got, I don't know, it's like 3,000 or 4,000 different components that we stock, that we keep on inventory at any given time, so that people can have whatever they might need, whatever color dice or what size dice that they need. And we also have a giant 3D print farm where we actually will 3D print pieces just custom to our shop. That's very different than, a long run manufacturer will source those components from somebody else, but they will not store anything in advance. Because it's often custom made for the game. So that's something that's very different about short run versus long run. Again, we have all this stuff pre-made because we need one, but you can't buy just one die. It would be very expensive. So we need to buy 10,000 dice, store them. And then you can buy one at a time, and all of our other customers can buy one at a time, and we eventually sell them all, right? But that's a very different model than just going out and sourcing the 10,000 dice you need for this one game later. So
then when people are putting together prototypes, how should they balance, quality kind of versus quantity of their components?
So we pretty much, with all of our printed goods, we have 3 tiers of components. We've got the cheapest thing that we can make for that, whatever that thing is that we're talking about, and then we have kind of the middle tier and the top tier, the most expensive version that we can make. And the most expensive version is beyond retail quality. Like, we make a thing called a stout box, for example. It's just a game box, right? But we call it a stout box because literally the walls of the paper or cardboard are so thick that me, a 300-pound dude, can stand on the box and not cave it in, right?
Wow. So
that's what, and we literally, when we launched those boxes, that was literally the video we used to show it off, was me standing on that box. So we have all 3 grades of that usually across all of our different components, so that you can choose, like, do I want this to be just inexpensive so I can just get it done quickly, or do I want it to look as good as possible, like I would buy it off of a retail game store?
Are you seeing, any kind of trends when people are prototyping games of maybe, some new things that people weren't doing before?
I mean, obviously people chase trends, right? By the time you see a trend, it's too late to be working on it in the industry. So, like, if the hot thing right now is collectible card games, by the time that you get a collectible card game made, it's too late, right? Or if the hot new thing is a roll and write thing, whatever, by the time you get it done, publishers will be on to something else by that point. So don't chase trends in that way. But as far as what we see in the market, the board game market is growing every year. It's doing well. And what we see from a prototyping point of view is you get kind of the people that come in because they got that one idea and they want to make it. And then you get people that came in and they become lifelong creators, right? So they build on that audience and they make hundreds of games over the course of, their career as a game designer. We had a person recently who just got in it to deal with his daughter. He wanted to have an activity to do with his daughter when I think she was 8 when they first started doing it. His daughter graduated from college recently, and he showed this picture of all, like, 30 games that they designed together over the last 15 years or whatever it's been. And that was his big social media picture. And this was like about a month ago. I thought that was so amazing, right?
And none of his games made it to the market. I mean, it was just something he was doing that he just wanted to do for his own.
Yeah, I don't know if he's ever tried to make them to the market. I know he sells them in our game store. So that's something I didn't mention, I suppose. We have an online marketplace where you can just sell your games. You don't have to go to a publisher and get them published. You put it up for sale in our shop. Somebody orders a copy, we print it on demand, we ship it out for you, and then we pay you the royalty. So I know he does that. Beyond that, I don't know if he actually ever tried to get them published or tried to publish them himself through, like, running a Kickstarter or something like that.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit more about, this marketplace.
Sure. So we've got, 10, I don't even know how many, 10,000 plus titles in the shop, basically any kind of game that you can imagine. And again, anybody can publish whatever they'd like into there. So you come up with a game design, you publish it, and then it's your job to market that, because obviously marketing 10,000 individual titles is really not something we could do well. So you market it to whoever you would like to market it to, and then, like I said, we produce it for you. How it works is that we initially, we're producing it, and it'll move up in our system. It'll automatically move to the top as you make more sales or as you get more reviews. We have this thing called a game rank behind the scenes that's taking into account all these different factors that are going on, which helps you move up in the marketplace, so that the top games that have gotten the most recognition from reviewers or from sales or whatever are kind of at the top of the list when you go to search for games. We also do something called a crowd sale, which allows you to put your game up for sale like a Kickstarter, except unlike a Kickstarter, there is no tilt. There's no point at which the game will fund. Literally one copy will fund the crowd sale. The difference is every 10 copies that you sell during the crowd sale, the price goes down for every single person who backed it. So if you get to 100, copies, then you've gotten 10 different levels of discounts, for example, throughout that sale. And we don't charge anybody's credit card until the very end of the sale. So that way, every single person that backed it during the crowd sale, let's say that's a week or 2 weeks or whatever the length of the sale is, every single person gets that discount at the end. So they might get like a 50% discount if enough people back it.
When you were setting out to create Game Crafters, was this always the intention to kind of build all of these facets out?
No. No, this has come from, the community feedback, really. Like, community was something we almost tripped into right from day one. So the original thing, I'll just back up there for a second. The original thing was I was designing games, and I hate the prototyping process personally. Like, I don't like printing out things and cutting them out. The actual crafting element of game design takes me away from designing games. So I was looking to automate that because I didn't like doing that part myself. So I looked around for companies that were doing it, and I couldn't find one. So I decided to create one. And that's how we started doing it. But almost immediately, a huge group of people glommed on to this concept. Like, at first I thought this was going to be a no-profit hobby business, right? Like, that this was always going to be a little side thing so that I could, not have to prototype.
Right.
And then it turned out a huge group of people glommed on, and they were like, oh, it would be great if you could do this. It would be great if you could do that. It'd be great if you do this. And so our community sort of organically built around us. And then we started building in more community features so that we could collaborate better with the community. And then, of course, that leads to actual features for, doing sales or doing, having a marketplace or whatever the thing is that people want. And so that's, we just keep adding it. In fact, to this day, we still have a page on our site called, if you go to thegamecrafter.com/ideas, you can literally submit ideas, and then people vote on them to have them float to the top. Whatever floats to the top, we keep working on.
You're a game designer as well. Can you talk a little bit about just your process for designing games and talk me through a little bit of how you approach prototyping?
Sure. So obviously it always starts with an idea. What's the thing you want to make? And in my case, like, it's really important to me that games tell a story. So I always start with kind of that. What is it? What is the story I'm trying to tell? And so I'll develop a few mechanics around that, and then I will go straight into Component Studio and whip out a prototype with the most basic version of that game that I can. Like, just what does it take to try and do the first round of play, right? That sort of thing. Make that up as quick as I can and bring it to a local playtesting session. So a lot of people these days playtest online. They'll use something like Tabletop Simulator or other tools like that where they will do a digital playtest. It doesn't work for me. I need to see the social interaction of a game because, again, telling a story in a group, that sort of thing. And so I go straight to a physical prototype, and then I go to a meetup. And we've got lots of meetups here in the Madison area, but they happen all over the country where people will meet up and go play test each other's games and get feedback, see how it goes. And then, for example, I'm running a convention here in 6 weeks from the date we're recording called Protospiel Madison, where we literally have hundreds of game designers come together and all play test each other's games for a whole weekend. And so those kinds of events, I go to them and get the feedback and then do that iteration again. I literally, so this, this is something I can do because I have a printing company, but I literally, a prototype usually lasts exactly one playtest for me. I playtest it. I find out all the things people didn't like. I go back, I make a new iteration and print it out again, and then go do it again. A lot of people will, use Sharpies on a card and makes changes and that sort of thing for a lot of time. But for me, I'm like, I'll wholesale change everything because I can very quickly, right? And so a prototype, I usually throw it away after every playtest because I want to go to the next iteration as far as I can, as quick as I possibly can.
So then when you were designing things like Captain is Dead, how long do you think that iteration took, or that prototyping stage took?
That took way too long. Yeah. So at that point, I hadn't designed the fail faster model of game design for myself. So that one took me like 6 years, I think it was.
Okay.
So it wasn't even my original design. There was somebody in our community that came up with the design, and I was working on it with him for a while, and he just didn't have the time to work on it. So I asked him if I could just keep working on it on my own. And so at the time, the Game Crafter wasn't my full-time day job or anything like that. I was still doing software development. So I would take it to software development conventions and things like that and play it after hours. We would, play test games and things like that. So, but over the course of all that, it would, it took like 6 years to get it to the point where it was really good. And I finally did a Kickstarter with it and all that. And it went off really well. And then now it's published by AEG, Alderac Entertainment Group, publishes it, and it's, I don't know how many tens of thousands of copies it's sold through them, but it's done really well.
And now in comparison to, like, if you were going to go through that same process today, how long do you think that would take you?
Generally speaking, if I can't get it to a finished point within a year, I'm pretty upset with myself.
Okay.
And I like to do it faster than that, but it depends on the complexity of the game, right? So if I'm doing something small, maybe I can get that done. In fact, I did a small game right now that's with a couple of publishers. I literally designed it in a weekend and then did playtesting over the course of another month after that. And I designed it actually at one of those protospiels that I just talked about. I wrote out cards at the protospiel. People barely could read it, but it made sense. And we moved forward. And like I said, a month later, it was done. But that's a pretty small game. It, plays 6 people in 30 minutes. So it's got to be pretty small. So it really depends on the complexity of the game, how long it's going to end up taking, because the more mechanisms you have, the more stuff you have to test and tweak.
Okay, and then let's talk about feedback.
Yeah.
Tell me how you get feedback, and then how you kind of process that feedback as it relates to your prototype.
Like I said, I go to these events. I do things in person. Other people do tabletop simulator and things of that nature to get their feedback. And that works for mechanics, but it doesn't work for that social thing, like I was saying. Right. So I think it's really important to get your game out in front of real people where they can see it, feel it, manipulate it, that sort of thing. Watching people is often more informative than what they tell you, right? If you see people struggling, they forget to do this, this rule keeps coming up over and over again where people forget to do it. Well, that's either you're doing it wrong. Like when I say you, I don't mean the playtester, I mean the designer. You've implemented it improperly, or it just shouldn't be there because cognitively people are missing it, right? So a lot of times the best feedback I get is actually just watching how people interact with the game and see, they clearly didn't like that piece, or it clearly is getting forgotten, or, that sort of stuff. But then you listen to all of their comments as well at the end. And the thing that's really important is not to say, people will try to tell you how to fix your game, but really the thing that you should be listening to is when they tell you how to fix your game, figure out what it is that they are not liking. And that's the thing you need to fix. Not necessarily how they told you to fix it, just what's the thing that's broken, right? And so you pay attention to that. And if you hear that kind of feedback coming up over and over again, you've got to deal with it because it's just going to keep coming up over and over again.
How is Component Studio different than Game Crafter? Component
Studio is a completely separate thing. It exists outside the world of Game Crafter, except that it can export to the Game Crafter. it's a subscription software service. Like I said, it's a website that you can go to upload your or to design your artwork for your cards and components. And a lot of people will use it to export a PDF that they'll print at home, or they'll use it to export images to create for Tabletop Simulator and other online tools like that, or the Game Crafter. And so it's a design software that is, like I said, outside the Game Crafter. A lot of people that there are people that lots of people that use Component Studio that never use the Game Crafter for anything. And so it's its own like community and that sort of thing. And it's all about automation. It's about getting that design element done as quickly as you can, because when you're designing a game, like we just talked about, where you find that there's a mistake or people aren't, grokking a particular thing, you're going to have to change your cards 100 times over the course of game design, something like that. So if you can do that in a way that's automated, where you just make this one change and then all 100 cards are updated, that's going to save you a ton of time and allow you to get back to playtesting that much quicker. If you spend 10 hours updating your cards every time you have to make a change, that's 10 hours you're not putting toward actually designing the game or playtesting the game.
So then can you recall stories where it was like they did it wrong, so then therefore at the end it was very difficult for them?
There's nothing you can really do wrong in prototyping, because the whole point is that you're experimenting, right? So the thing that you end up doing wrong, the thing where you see a horror story, is either an emotional one where, like, and I'm guilty of this just as much as anybody, you take offense to whatever people are giving back as feedback, right? That's the worst thing you can do, because they shut down and they don't give you any more feedback if you do that. So just say, okay, and write it down, right? Don't try to defend your position. That's the biggest horror story, to be honest with you. The other thing that you can do is be unwilling to change, right? You've got your baby here and it's so fragile and I don't want to, no, kill your baby, right? Like, right. I know that's really gross to say it, but it's I guess kill your darling would be a better way to say it. You've got to be willing to take that feedback. The whole point of, doing a prototype is because the thing is not finished yet. The bun is not ready to come out of the oven. So you need to be able to go back and remix those ingredients and be open to the change that needs to happen to be successful.
And then what are the steps of after, okay, I have my prototype done. I think the game's as good as it's going to be. What are the things that I should be preparing for the next step?
Yeah, at that point, and honestly, even earlier than that, you should really start figuring out what it is that you want to do with your game. For a lot of people like myself, publishing isn't the end goal. It's like literally coming up with the design, the thought process is the point. Right? That journey of designing the game is the most important thing. If it happens to get published, great, but that's not the goal. But for other people, finding a publisher is the big thing. So you should be thinking about who it is that your ideal publisher for this game is. What kind of games do they publish? And so am I designing a game that they're going to even be interested in at the end? Or maybe their mind is in a different place and they want to publish themselves. They want to run a Kickstarter or start a publishing company, that sort of thing. But then you've got to open your mind up to, do I really want to start a business? Because that's what running a Kickstarter is starting a business. You've got to, do marketing and accounting and customer service and warehousing and all these things, right? Logistics. So, start wrapping your brain around what is the end point for this for you? What is important to you for what this is, and then start working toward those goals, whether it be building up a social media presence if you're going to be a Kickstarter person, because you're going to want to, you got to get eyeballs on the thing, or making relationships with publishers by going to conventions and volunteering to do things with them, or just, maybe your goal is to publish it on the Game Crafter and just sell it that way. So then you need to build up a little bit of an audience of, how are you going to promote it in our shop? So working inside of our community, maybe. So it's all about, what is it? What are your goals for where the endpoint is with this product?
Well, and then is there any sort of concern with the, keeping the cost down of the game that you're trying to sell and the amount of components that you have in that game?
I mean, obviously it's a product in the end, and cost is important, right? It's a factor you cannot get around. So yeah, that's important. A publisher is going to ask you what the list of components are, because that's the first thing they're going to want to know, so they can decide whether this is something that's viable in the marketplace. But the kind of things that you're going to want to do, and you're not going to know this until you are ready to publish, unfortunately, are things like sheet counts. So for example, depending on who is going to print your game, there's a certain amount of components they can fit on a given sheet. The more sheets you have, the more printing plates that there are, the more dies, for stamping things out, all that. So it's going to go up. So let's just use cards because it's simple. At the Game Crafter, we print 18 cards to a sheet. So you might want to maximize the number of cards. If you go to 19 cards, you're onto 2 sheets, right? Or, any multiple of 18. If you go over that, it's going to cost you a little bit more. So you want to keep it at 18 or under is your multiple for that. Whereas if you're going to a long run company, they're probably printing on meter square sheets. So you're getting, 56 cards to a sheet or something like that. So keeping in mind how the thing is made is going to help you. But until you know what your goal is for, how this is going to be published, or what printing company is going to print it for you, or any of that stuff, that's really hard to do. So it's really about, don't have components that don't justify their cost, right? If it's used for one thing at one moment in the game, probably not useful. Like, it should just get removed from the game because it hasn't justified its cost.
Now, for anybody listening, you can't see that I have a box of Cthulhu Death May Die behind me, which is, I am a sucker for big, like 3D miniatures, as I think a lot of people are. When's the right time to start throwing in minis and all that sort of thing?
So miniatures are going to be the most expensive thing that you can add to your game. It's, when you're talking about the molds that you have to make for them, it's going to be $5,000 per individual miniature that you want to put into the game. And I mean individual figure type that's in there, like each shape that you're creating. So it's going to be, if you've got 10 unique miniatures, it's going to be $50,000 up front before you even make a single game, before you print anything, before you inject anything. $50,000. So that's a lot of money that has to be absorbed in the production run of whatever it is that you're creating. And so you got to think you're going to sell a lot of copies in order to go that route.
So I have to trash my idea of having life-size Cthulhus for my next game that I want to come out with?
You don't have to trash it. You just have to sell 1 billion copies.
Okay, good.
Totally realistic.
Let's talk a little bit about the best things to do when you're testing your game.
When you're testing your game, have in mind what it is that you want to get out of the test, right? What questions are you going to ask people, or what is the thing you're trying to test? Don't try to test your entire game every time you play it, because you're just wasting your time. Like, it's going to be broken at a certain point. Stop when it's broken, or stop when you've got the feedback that you need. So, because everything after this point is going to be changed because of, feedback you've gotten or whatever the thing is. So it's more important to keep your playtesters giving you feedback until they have given you what you need. And that way they'll be more willing to come back and test again in the future, because you haven't wasted their time, right? Be cognizant of their time. But also, like I said, make sure that you've got questions that you want to ask, because a lot of times people will give you their thoughts at the end, which is useful. But unless they actually address the thing you were trying to test in those thoughts, you haven't gotten, everything you could have out of that test. So it's important to set up the game in such a way that it will play out in the way that you want to test it, right? So if it's a narrative driven thing, and players can make choices, set up the choices such that it will result in testing that thing, whatever that thing is. So don't just randomly, or don't just set it down like it's a game night and, it goes how it goes. That's not how testing works, right? Testing, you should identify the problems that you're looking to massage, and make sure that those situations come up so that playtesters experience them and then can give you valid feedback about them.
So you're trying to kind of set up a specific scenario that then you can really closely look at, okay, this particular thing that I'm trying to figure out about this game.
Right. So as an example, I went to Protospiel Chicago a few weeks ago now, and I have a game that I'm working on where there's this particular battle that happens at a certain point in the game, and I really wanted to see how that played out, this particular situation. And it turned out, in my head, it was a glorious thing that was going to happen. Like, this was going to be an epic moment in the game. And it turned out that it was boring. And it was a big battle. Don't get me wrong. The battle, the size, the enormity of the whole thing, everybody liked that. It was interesting in that regard, but it was kind of boring because it was kind of, you're really just having to knock down a whole lot of points off the bad guy, right? There aren't enough decisions going on to create this story that should come out, right? So this is the crescendo of you've gone through all this stuff to get to the big bad and do the thing. And then the thing is boring. Right. So I just went in and I'm like, we're going to just play this part of it. Right. I've already got all the cards set up like you would have played all of the stuff that happened before this. We're just going to do this part. And then, like I said, in my head, this was going to be awesome. And then when they played it out and I'm watching them, I'm yawning. I'm like, what is, this is bad. And they hadn't experienced all the stuff that came before it. So they didn't really understand everything that was going on. But they too, at the end, were like, man, I wish I could have done this, or I wish I could have done that, because it would have added this little twist. And I'm like, yeah, those things would be great. And so now I'm retooling that whole thing. But I didn't have them play, the stuff, everything that came before that. I just narrowed it right down to the one thing I was trying to test to see how it went. And then that cut the play time down to a quarter of what it would have been otherwise. And I got great feedback so that I can fix that part that's completely broken that I didn't know was broken.
So that's all amazing advice. Are there any good places that people can go to start kind of thinking about what they want to do?
There are a lot of great resources. Obviously, the Game Crafter has all of our different communities. You should go to those. There's the whole Protospiel subculture that I've been talking about here. The Game Crafter participates in that, but we aren't the progenitor of that. So there's lots of those. There's a lot of design meetup groups on meetup.com and Facebook groups for different regions of the world so that you can do in-person stuff. There's a great subreddit called Tabletop Game Design and another one called Board Game Design that are great resources that you can go interact with other people. So there's all kinds of that sort of material, or of those communities that you can engage with and build up an audience for your game, but also ask people, what do you think of this? You should also, if you came to a Protospiel, one of the things that the Game Crafter provides is we create this table that's at every Protospiel that's just board game pieces, right? It's the little plastic bits like we were talking about earlier, but it's also just thousands of blank cards, and blank game boards and blank dials and all kinds of things like that, where you can literally use that to kind of make a game, update your game, whatever. Find a way to get blank components or components that you can use. So you can do that, going to these Protospiels. You can buy them from the Game Crafter or Amazon. You can make them at home, whatever it is, but get yourself a little library, a kit for building out games, because it'll help you prototype faster if you happen to have some stuff around, right? Physical materials. And then I think it's really about, like I said, engaging the community. You can also, it's surprising how many things outside the board game world are useful for designing your game. Like a hardware store is a great place to get bits, for example. Use nuts and bolts. They're cheap, they're durable, and they'll work great to, create the little pieces on your board, right? So for 10 cents, you can get a whole bunch of little screws or washers or whatever, right? A crafts hobby store is great for that sort of stuff. Another great thing is, depending on what your game is, you could use different communities. So for example, the game I'm working on that I was just talking about with the big monster, the big bad, there's an element to the game that is puzzle solving. It's almost like an escape room. And so I have visited a whole bunch of puzzle solving communities on the internet, and I didn't tell them that I was working on a game, or I didn't tell them what this was for. I was just like, here, I designed this puzzle, try to solve it. and just to see how they would do it. And it's like a play test without actually having a play test. It's just like 100 people try to solve this puzzle and they can tell you whether or not they got the right answer out of it, that sort of thing. And so, however you do that, engage with different communities and get different resources that will help you with that. Like, I remember a few years ago, a lady was making this amazing game about horse riding, and she had been horse trainer for years, and she was engaged with all these people who deal with that sort of stuff. But when she started trying to get statistics about horses and equipment around horses and all that kind of stuff, she could pull on all of these resources from the horse community to make this board game, right? So it's really bringing in whatever it is that you have for whatever the theme of your game is and making that work for you.
JT, thanks for coming on today. And I encourage everyone to go to thegamecrafter.com to see all the amazing stuff that they have going on there. So thanks so much for being here today.
Thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
Thank you for joining me on Product of Play. If you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to subscribe. Continue the conversation with fellow listeners on our Discord channel and check out past episodes and more at productofplay.com. This is Product of Play, where the art of game creation meets the science of product success.